So when I was 12 years old, my grandfather called me over, sat me down in front of him and said, when do you see the moon? At night. What does the moon do? It gives light. And that's why I give you the name. In times of darkness, I want you to give light. Just after my qualifying exam for the PhD, I had a mental breakdown. So what I wanted to do came from a place of anger and scarcity and reactivity. Then are we comfortable with ourselves? Are we at peace? Because we can't give what we do not have.
Welcome to the Light Forest Podcast, a journey of exploration to bring more light into how we live and regenerate our planet. And I'm really delighted to bring to all of you to the podcast a friend, you, or Qamaruzzaman. Q has been an educator since the year 2000, an educator for peace, or as you also put it, an edu learner. And we'll unpack some of these themes. With Light Forest, a big part of my journey is finding the roots of where our world is based on, finding the roots for the violence, of the chaos, and peace is a big part of that. Finding peace and understanding what peace means. So I think exploring some of these themes to your journey of understanding, helping other people understand, and contributing to bringing some peace on this planet. First, to start, I did say your name, Qamaruzzaman. Can you tell me a little bit about the name? The origin?
It's Arabic. My maternal grandfather gave it to me. So Qamar literally means moon, Arabic, and Zaman, era, time. So when I was 12 years old, my grandfather called me over, sat me down in front of him and said, do you know what your name means? And I said, it just so happened I had researched it. This was before internet, of course. This was way back. But I found a book which had the names of Arabic names and then figured out what my name meant. So and I shared it with him, moon, time. He nodded in appreciation, said, oh, you know, good. But do you know what it really means? I said, no. And he said, when do you see the moon? At night. What does the moon do? It gives light. And that's when he said, he tapped me on my knee and said, and that's why I give you the name. In times of darkness, I want you to give light.
Oh.
Thanks. But it's a beautiful name. And I think that's a narrative that I have about myself. That ever since the age of 12, I wanted to do that. Yeah.
Well, then, I couldn't have any better person onto a Light Forest podcast to shed light from the reflecting of the moon itself. What I find really interesting about your approach to peace is you bring in dimensions of inner peace along with peace in this seemingly external world around us. The inner dimensions of peace is something that I think through my education, studying international relations, studying political science, were never part of it. And I think that contributed in many ways to my misunderstanding of why the world is the way it is. And what was your journey of understanding this and starting to then unpack it for yourself?
Well, for all of us, it's a lifelong journey, right? And there's so many experiences that are life significant. I'm going to just articulate two of everything that has led me to this approach. So the first one would be when I was studying for my PhD in peace building and specialising in peace education. I came across this particular model of true peace, which has three dimensions: the inner dimension, the social dimension, and the environmental dimension. Just after my qualifying exam for the PhD, I had a mental breakdown. And I had emerging memories of adverse childhood experiences that my mind had blocked out. Very violent, right? And that happened in 2018. And in 2018, I was 44 years old. And that breaking apart and then reforming, reimagining, re-narrating my life story brought me to a greater understanding. So it wasn't just cognitive knowledge, it was visceral. I felt it in the bones that it is the inner dimension of peace. And because of what I experienced as a child, which was the driving force for my wanting to do good in this world. So what I wanted to do came from a place of anger and scarcity and reactivity. And after my mental breakdown and the healing journey that came from that episode, I understood more deeply the importance of the inner dimension of peace. Which it's not more important than the social dimension or the environmental dimension. They're all equally important. Right?
Yeah.
We can't have one without the other. I just see the inner dimension of peace as foundational to the social and environmental dimensions.
Wow. Can you help us unpack a little bit these three dimensions as you explain it or as you teach it to some of the people that you work with and some of the students that work with you?
Starting with the inner dimension of peace, in a sentence or two, I would say the first fundamental question is, who am I, right? That I think is fundamental. And when I know who that is, or in my search for who I am, the core, my ikigai, so to speak. I mean, our ikigai is part of it, our sense of identity, right? It's all interconnected, of course. Then are we comfortable with ourselves within our skin? Are we at peace? Because we can't give what we do not have. And that's why I see the inner dimension of peace as important. And when we move on to the social dimension of peace, and here I'm talking about just within our species and Homo sapiens, the social dimension has two levels. There's the interpersonal, and then there's the intergroup. Right now, you are Dev, I'm Q. That's who we rec, how we interact with each other. Once we bring in our collective, our imagined, constructed collective identities, Indian, Singaporean, born and brought up in a Muslim setting, and you in a different faith. So then those elements then come in, and the field of peace studies gives us quite a few understandings that can contribute to this intergroup level, the imagined part of our, but it's so real, right? It's hard to hear. It's not physical reality, it's imagined reality, but it's so real to us, it's so important to us.
And is the source of so much of violence.
Yeah, right?
Defending, fighting for this imagined community.
Yeah, so how can we reimagine? And then the environmental dimension of peace is where then we expand our moral circle to include other beings on this planet, non-human beings, sentient or non-sentient. And it's not just about the trees, the birds. It's also even about what we do as humans, that impact the carbon cycle, the water cycle, all those things. So to me, it's about spirituality, right? It's about connectedness. How deeply do we feel we are connected to this universe? I'm a physics guy, right? That's my background. So now the atoms that make up my body, it's the same as the atoms around me. And when I die, my atoms go back and my consciousness returns somewhere. That's the way I see it, right?
Yeah, I like that line that you dropped at the start when you said, we cannot give what we do not have. And that leads me to also where we are today, where we are in many ways trying to create peace. But then do we even have peace already to give, whether it's to our neighbor or whether it's as a nation? And okay, I'm going to ask you just a very big question. That's what we do at the podcast here. We ask big questions. What is at the root of all the conflict, the violence that we as human species have been dealing with for thousands of years? As I said, it was a big question. You don't have to give a comprehensive answer, but something that feels resonant or animates you as you've explored this.
Homo sapiens came into existence based on the science that we know now, right? About 300,000 years ago. Homo erectus, I don't know, off the top of my head, millions of years, we do know that, right? At least 1 million years. Right? We are products of evolution. We are animals. That's it. And we have highly developed prefrontal cortex. The capacity for abstract reasoning is very high. The capacity for storytelling, imagining. We live in the 21st century with the science and technology that we have to do great harm to ourselves. And at the same time, to be, to do beautiful things for ourselves and for other species on this planet. And we cannot forget that we came out from that primordial soup. I'm not saying that it's bad. It just is, right? It's the way...
It's that evolutionary journey.
Yeah, it's evolutionary journey, right? Of all living beings on this planet. So we share, that the brainstem with reptiles. We share the limbic system with other mammals. We share prefrontal cortex with other primates. Ours just more developed. And we have had education and learning in a formal space that really train this part here. There's a disconnect between here and what's back there. So we still have our animal tendencies. I'm not saying it's bad. We need to accept that and acknowledge it. But let's say we choose to use violence to settle a conflict, to address conflict. Let's say we choose, right? Because we choose. Now, but when we choose, is it choosing or is it choosing without awareness, right? When the amygdala is hijacked. In the 21st century, we have weapons. If I run amok right now with an AK, I can do a lot of harm to a lot of people. When it's with sticks and stones, that's so. And I can be overpowered. So I guess for me, this violence that we see, the chaos that we see, it's, we have our, what we would call our primitive, animalistic drives, and at our disposal, constructs of groups, a sense of belonging, of dehumanizing each other, and we have the weapons we have the technology. Let's not call them weapons. We have the technology to do great harm to many. So,
Yeah. I mean, it was a big question, and I'm grateful that you've taken us this 300,000-year journey of evolution. On this podcast, I've had similar questions to different people. Not particularly about peace and violence, but sort of looking for the roots of our modern systems today. And the common answer that I get from a lot of people is actually modernity. Sort of linking our economic systems, looking at political systems, linking to our current ontology and understanding of who we are. As you said, your first question of inner peace is, who am I? And this orientation of separation, this reductionist view of the world coming in from this period. But my sense hearing from you is that, like, when it comes to peace and violence, this journey goes back actually much deeper. And it's not that we had like a more peaceful world before and then that became violent 500 years ago. We've been on this, we've been animals in that sense, and there's been violence and peace in equal part. How do you see the world today then? Do you see it in a sense where we have come any closer to finding balance? Because what I hear you say is that we have both, right? We have this capacity for violence, but then we also have this immense capacity for love and connection and empathy. And my sense is today that everything's just out of whack. We're just way too much on this heightened fear space, and where these social dimensions that you talked about have, in a way, like weaponized our mind, militarized our mind, and we have kind of lost the sense of who we are and what we're fighting for. How do you see where we are as a civilization today?
My belief is that our species has done more good than harm to ourselves. That's my sincere belief. Yes, we've done horrible things, and we've done amazingly beautiful things. And on balance, our species has been more collaborative than destructive. And the reason why I say that, I'll just share a quick anecdote. Now, it was in 2003 when, I was a teacher. I was an educator with Singapore's Ministry of Education. So I was in the public school system. And then in 2003, I left the Ministry of Education. And I joined an international school in Singapore. So in 2003, how old was I then? 29, right? So I was 29 years old. And I told my family, my extended family, that, I'm leaving Ministry of Education and I'm joining this international school. And my uncles and aunts, and my youngest uncle is only 15 years older than me, perhaps 20. He just turned to me in shock and just went, "That's a school for white people, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes, it's international schools, foreigners, a lot more white people than in the public school system." And then my next younger aunt just blurted out, "We can teach white people?" That's not that long ago. And so for my uncles and aunts, we brown-skinned people serve tea to the white colonial officers, and we can't teach them anything. Whereas for us, we're like, we're just fellow human beings. Right? It's just a generation shift. And that's what I'm trying to get at is, right now in this century, we are talking about gender equality. We're talking about dismantling the patriarchy systems. And for me, just to be clear, patriarchy isn't a man-woman thing. That is part of it. Patriarchy to me is about power, power relations. And patriarchy started 5,000 years ago, right? With our first agrarian civilizations. But look where we are right now. We have the internet. I'm from Singapore, I'm living here. You're from India, you're living here. We can fly around. And all these things, right? We have this camera, we have mic, science, technology would not be possible if we had not collaborated. No single human being can produce all this. We needed, it's a global, Isaac Newton wasn't expecting this when he was studying light, in his time. But what he discovered about light gave us so many things now. And it's not just Isaac Newton, it was so many others. And not just within Europe, it's in all parts of the world. So we've collaborated. So I think, right, for me, I have faith that there's enough collaboration. Now, of course, I want the violence to be lessened.
No, I think it's really important that you emphasize that, because I mean, there's a reason why I chose the name Light Forest. And because in the forest, I feel like there is both happening, and forest would not be possible without immense collaboration. I recently came across also some of the work of a biologist, Lynn Marcus, who was famous for challenging the mainstream norm that this Darwinian competition, survival of the fittest story kind of gripped us. And, what I'm hearing from you, as you say, is like collaboration, cooperation. That is what has actually been a big driving force. And it's not to say competition isn't part of it, but perhaps in the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, the survival of the fittest story has maybe gripped us, and we have lost sight of that collaboration aspect. I mean, it's happening, but it's lost sight as a core story or a metaphor of who we are.
Where I am right now, the way I see when I examine the natural world, and we are part of that. Yes, there's competition. The symbiotic relationships that are present right now and that will be present in the future are being shaped by various forces. And those forces, for lack of a better word, compete, right? So to shape, right? And then what genes are then reproduced for the next. But it's not disharmony in the sense that we humans think about it. It's just life, a give and take, and something emerges. For us, we live in the actual physical reality, which is with nature, which is with other beings. And we live in our imagined reality, which we actualize within our physical reality. So that to me is the part, that imagined reality where we don't imagine, in a state of nature, there's competition, survival of the fittest. We are imagining that. And that's our narrative. Therefore, when we construct our human systems to arrange, that then leads to the kind of human condition that we are right now, right? Our societal arrangements then becomes, then we are competing, because it's the story we are telling now. We're imagining that. So can we imagine something different? Yeah, so because we are gripped, as you say, I love the way you put it, we are gripped by that narrative, and therefore we build structures, we have systems, our education system, encourages that. And that's where, that inner dimension of peace comes in, which is about we begin questioning these things as a policy designer, as a teacher in a classroom, right? As a national leader. What are our foundational beliefs, assumptions, axioms, postulates that we have taken for granted, that then informs the way we contribute to the perpetuation of certain structures and systems that are not helpful nor healthy for us as individuals, as well as our human global community, as well as the non-human beings. The planet, really.
I think that the thread that you just articulated feels really profound to me, that we are just observing phenomena, but then we've attached certain stories to it. And even competition, we can then attach stories onto it. Even violence can be another story, and then start to imagine systems around that. I think that feels definitely very resonant with how I feel about how things are at the moment. So take me deeper into your education for peace approach, your journey. How do you approach education for peace?
Now I'm just ordering it. My mother was a religious teacher, and her father was before her. So I'm third generation. And they don't just teach, they educate. They were community leaders. They were role models. They represented the values and ideals, for the members of their community. So that's what I saw growing up. I admired them tremendously, both my mom and her father. And then when I was 16 years old, and this was when I first ate 3 meals a day, I got a scholarship to attend a school in Canada, right, called the United World College, Pearson College. It's part of the United World Colleges movement. There are 18 United World Colleges on this planet. So the mission of the United World Colleges, this movement, right? Education is a force to unite nations, people, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future. So as a 16-year-old, that just blew my mind. And I had 2 amazing years exploring those in all of my subjects, in all of my extracurricular activities. And it resonated much with what I grew up with, what I saw role modeled by my mom and her father. So after I got my teaching license in Singapore, I joined the Ministry of Education. So I taught physics, but I educated for peace. Similarly, when I joined the United World College of Southeast Asia, I taught physics, theory of knowledge, and within those subjects, I educated for peace. I was in a UWC, in a United World College. I'm fortunate to be able to do peace education. So I facilitated, together with a few of my friends, former colleagues, right, facilitated an extracurricular activity which focuses on peace education. My grade 11 students, IB first year students, spent a whole year first being introduced to foundational ideas in peace studies, conflict and violence studies. That's in the first term, so to speak. And then learned facilitation skills. And then in the final third of the year, planned a residential learning community experience, a week-long one for our participants who were their age group. So we did it in Sri Lanka, Timor-Leste, and in Thailand along the Thai-Myanmar border. And since we are in Chiang Mai, we had this week-long conference in Mesot. And I would have 20 of my students as facilitators. They planned the whole week. And we have about 40 participants, 40-ish, 50-ish participants. And they are Thais, they are children of migrant worker families, especially from Myanmar, documented, undocumented. We had even had refugees from Mela camp. So in that week, UWC students facilitate the very difficult conversations about peace, conflict, violence, as well as examine and explore the roles that we as individuals can take out, if we choose to contribute to peace building, conflict transformation. So at that age, right, in your late teens, early 20s, we begin asking. And then we have the rest of our lives to then do what we want to do with the questions that we begin examining at that age. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I went on a digression.
I think the UWC story felt very relatable to me as well. This feeling of education as a force for uniting people. And how do you feel like that has played out? So you went in as a 16-year-old. You were inspired by that vision. Reflecting back now, how do you feel like that vision, that idea has played out in the world and for yourself?
At the individual level, I feel extremely blessed, right, by that opportunity. The world, it broadened my horizon. I mean, I grew up with 50 cents every day, 25 cents to take the bus to school, 25 cents to come home. That's it. And all I saw was that. And Singapore is a very small island. Going to UWC, my world expanded. I saw different things. I learned from so many. And in the UWC, I had 200 schoolmates with 100 countries represented. And it's beautiful. So at the individual level, being from the background I came from, I think it just was amazing, right? And that's why I'm here in Chiang Mai. I'm married to a UWC graduate, right? She was my first love. Broke up, I hunted her down 16 years after we graduated, after we broke up, we got married. And we are now 17 years in our marriage, separate conversation. And I'm still in touch with so many of my friends from back then. And they're all doing amazing things. They're all contributing, from bankers to lawyers to dancers, fellow educators like myself, right? We're all living our lives, asking ourselves, what can I do today? What do I choose to do today? What do I want to do? so that I can live this mission. So at the individual level, there's that. At the collective level, when we look at global, right? I have to admit, I think it was this year was very, very, very hard for me to. There was a point this year where I just wanted to throw in the towel. Like, let's just go back to teach physics, man. You know, like, why am I doing this peace education thing? Not many schools and organizations are interested in doing this. Oh, we don't need peace education. No, we don't need to educate for peace. Because there's no war here right now, especially in the Singapore context. And then when it comes to the with the Burmese partners, it'll be more about the social dimension as opposed to the inner dimension, which of course is what is needed. And at the same time, we cannot neglect.
Tell me a little bit more about working with the Burmese context. I know you've also worked with the Palestine and Israel context, but tell me a little bit more about how you're working on the social dimension there, what the challenges are, and what you're seeing as maybe pathways for greater peace.
Well, the Palestine, first, I haven't done really much work with any Palestinian or Israeli communities, right? I mean, that's something that, fingers crossed, something may turn out next year. With the various Burmese groups that I have been collaborating with, right? And I'm focusing specifically on learning in a formal space, right? Education, online groups. When we look at the inner dimension of peace, it's about inviting my learners to examine themselves more, given the context that they have grown up in, especially given the context of since 2021, right? Especially for this younger group, right? Who are in their late teens and early 20s, who had experienced when there wasn't a military regime, who grew up with so much hope with a civilian government, and now they're experiencing this. So from the inner dimension, it's about understanding what triggers us, navigating strong emotions, so that it's not about suppressing what we feel. So it's not just all logic, of course, right? But it's about acknowledging and embracing and then making decisions. Okay, one anecdote. I think maybe this anecdote will capture it. This happened during one of our extracurricular activities in Mason, right? It's called Initiative for Peace, right? Where I work with my students, and then we have participants of that age group coming in as for a week. So there was one participant from the refugee community, and he turned out on the first day like this, like really angry, really dark, really. His energy was one of like pure rage almost. And then my students were like, Q, we don't know what to do with this guy. It's like, all right, gotcha. Sat down with him and had lunch together, and we spoke. I said, hey man, what's up? And he was like, and this was on the first day. And he was like, I'm a soldier. I've killed the Tatmadaw. And this is someone in his late teens. So he was a child soldier. He has been a child soldier. I've killed, and I've seen my friends killed by Burmans. And now I'm going to spend the next week with a Burman to eat, sleep, and talk with them in the same room. I said, yeah, you signed up for it, and let's
give it a try.
Give it a try. At the end of the week, I asked him what his thoughts and feelings were as we were about to leave. And he was like, I still am so angry at this group of people, at these Burmans, for causing us so much pain and harm. This Burman is my friend. So for me, that captures what I, with the Burmese, in terms of the inner dimension of peace, right? For me, that's inner dimension, because it's about how you feel. And then it goes into the social dimension of peace. Now, in this case, it's not at the collective level yet, but it's at the interpersonal level. You are a Burman. Your group has caused us harm. I have killed some of you, but you are my friend. I can't harm you. That's the starting point, isn't it? And fast forward, I think 5-6 years, I was invited to because this is on the internet and it's public, I have to really choose my words carefully. I was invited to a gathering, a meeting of a group of people who were designing the education policies for the future. And I arrived. So I was asked to come in to contribute my ideas about how can we have peace as part of the curriculum. I arrived and sat down, and then in the distance, it was him. He was running around with paper and pencil and pen.
Same guy.
It's like this was 5-6 years after, right? After he was part of our thing. I had a chat with him, and he was like, oh, I'm a junior officer now within this education department. And I spoke to other seniors, senior members of the education department. I said, yeah, he's one of our rising stars. Right? He can be, if he chooses to, in the future, someone influential within our education department. And I don't know where he is now. I hope he's safe. I hope he's still within that department. And I hope he still remembers that he has a Burman friend.
Wow, that's a uplifting story. And I guess the takeaway that I'm getting from that is that ultimately it doesn't really matter what our imagined communities are, but if you can get people in a space together, and if you can get people to just talk, there's possibilities or there's hope for a lot of deep connection. And that may not supersede that social dimension, because maybe a person has felt that their community is too important and their judgment of your community is too important. But they're still able to establish this friendship, and we're able to hold two truths at the same time.
And don't get me wrong, right? I think this is again my understanding of this. Our collective identities, which are constructed, imagined, because they are not based on meaningful relationships. When I say meaningful relationships, now if you look at a particular framing of it, Dunbar's number, you can have only up to 150 meaningful relationships. Now, those relationships, those identities are relational identities. Beyond that, and here we're talking about large collectives, right? The great traditions, the faiths, right? If I'm a Christian here in Singapore, I meet a fellow Christian in Nigeria, it's like, hey, brother, let's go to church together. Right? I don't know you, but we have that imagined sense of kinship. It's beautiful. So collective identities are important because to me, they are a significant component of our spiritual health. And when I think about spirituality, our spiritual health, right? There are two pillars. One is, do I feel I belong to a greater whole? I'm a physics guy. I feel I belong to the universe, right? And then that sense of numinous, sense of awe, transcendent, like can we feel that? So these two things for me are important. And in my opinion, you can't feel a sense of awe if you can't feel you belong to something greater than yourself. And that's why our collective identities are important. And I'm not saying that we should I'm not Jew, I'm not Muslim, I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Ukrainian, I'm not Russian. No, it's about knowing, yes, I am Singaporean, Malay, and I was born and brought up in a Muslim environment. So my values derive from that upbringing. Yeah, that's fun. I mean, that's kinship. That's me. And I know they're all constructs because I could have been Thai, Buddhist, ethnic Karen if my consciousness had emerged in a different body, in a different geographical location, in a different family.
Yeah, so that's a great link then, as you just said this. These imagined communities, these are also core part of peace, because they also can create immediate kinship, where a person is able to meet somebody else they don't know, but instantly by being part of the same community, there is a shared understanding, shared values, which may have been developed anyway if they spent a week together. But here it was instant, right? There's this instant. And I really like what you said about that feeling of awe that only comes when you're part of something larger. And that community or any imagined community gives you that sense. Of course, as human beings, we already have that. But then maybe, the challenge is sometimes when we forget that and we hold on, or that imagined community gets a bit too rigid. And maybe some of our imagined communities are too exclusionary. It's like if you're part of this community, then you absolutely cannot be part of another community. That community is now in competition, going back to that earlier story about strategic competition for resources. So that's the personal. You move up to social. How do you take it to the next level?
I'm still developing that. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still trying it out. But just before we go there, and I think this kind of like segues into that, right? Belonging, the sense of wanting to belong to a greater whole. That's our animalistic part. Right? It's instinctive. It's hardwired to evolutionary forces over the last so many millennia, thousands of millennia, into our brain. We must be for our own health, and we must be part of a larger group. Now, what that larger group is what we imagine it to be. And that's what I'm trying to get at. And how we imagine that collective is determined by what, we've been culturally programmed with, that we've been socialized with, that we believe in. And these things tend to be in our unconscious, and we need to unpack it, and we need to shine light into it. It's like, oh, okay, you know what? That's not that helpful or healthy. Let's take that out. Let's put something else in, right? So that's the beauty of being in the 21st century, right? More and more of us are learning, right? To do that. I love social and emotional learning. That field has so much to offer in that sense. So the environmental dimension of peace, when we explore what is beyond the human species, is that it's about that sense of belonging. Who do we feel? Do I have a meaningful relationship with other living beings on this planet? Can I have? Is there any other living being on this planet from another species that I have a meaningful relationship with? So that's a question I ask. And so for quite a number of us, we have pets. And because we have a dog or cat at home and we have that relationship, or fish, or and talk to it, we then become more aware of life. Can we expand that to include plants too? And for those of us who are gardeners, horticulturalists, and do we respect life? Are we life-centered or are we human-centered? And I think that's the important part here right now in this, where we are right now. When we talk about climate change, when we talk about anthropogenic climate change and enhanced global warming due to human activities, right? Like then the question becomes what we do at a global level, right? The systems and structures that run all the various imagined countries that we have. Again, I'm not saying that we do away with countries. We need state-like entities to bring order. There cannot be peace if there's no order, and there cannot be order if there's no peace. So order is a top-down thing, and peace is a bottom-up. Peace bubbles from all of us. We need state-like entities to give order.
Create the conditions.
Yes, create conditions that allow for that bubbling. Is it going to be like a heat kind of, or is it going to be like frothing? And then again, it's not either or, it's not binary. So sorry, I'm digressing again. So the point here being is just about expanding our moral circle to include, or as I said just now, it's about, are we life-centric when we are designing our systems and structures and individual behavior and the choices we make as individuals on a daily basis. Are we human-centric or are we life-centric? Is it just for us, for me, or I ride a motorcycle, for example, right? A fossil fuel motorcycle. I shouldn't. I enjoy it. I make no bones about it. I've been riding since I was 20 years old.
So are we human-centric or are we life-centric? That's a nice framing.
Oh, this is my face of guilt and shame about my fossil fuel motorcycle. Sorry.
Don't sit with me. Because as you're developing this, as you touched on, we are in this moment of time when maybe we've lost that life connection, that life centricity. We're extremely human-centric. And that human centricity now has taken us to a point where we're not even peaceful among humans because maybe we've lost that life centricity. In having lost the life centricity, we're now trying to feel peace more, but we're doubling down on the human centricity, thinking like, I need to grip on to this identity, to this nation, to this religion, to this community. And I have kind of lost that sense of awe. I've lost that sense of, so you use the word numinous, right? I've lost that sense of awe and wonder of what it means to be human, what it means to be part of something, truly part of something large. And that feels like maybe something in a light forest world, I can see that as a very important connection that we all have and feel into. Because otherwise we're then just rummaging through the world, trying to find it in a place we're not going to find it. Either through a job or through a relationship or through some sort of sense of power, prestige, recognition. But that's all coming from the imagined communities rather than coming in from this life centricity, this life numinous connection. And that piece, which is a bubbly piece, a frothy piece, that just becomes I like that metaphor, becomes a very loose and maybe not quite substantive piece. So you talk about positive peace. Can you expand that?
Well, I think it's a genius, right? This scholar. Before we go into positive and negative peace, I think we first need to understand that there are three types of violence. And there's the physical violence that we all see, right? The direct violence against each other. And the question then becomes, why did that erupt? And that's where then the invisible types of violence then emerges. And when we examine it, the cultural violence and structural violence. And this is where language then breaks down, right? Because we are so used to using violence in the physical sense that when we say, oh, that's culturally violent or that's structurally violent, you're like, oh, it's not violent. Like, yeah, it's not violent, but it contributes to inequality, inequity, injustice. Right? That's what we mean by violence. When we define violence, it's what the way Galtung says it, and I really appreciate it, is that violence are all those things that prevent us from becoming who we can be. So if I were to, be physically violent to you right now, I'm not allowing you to then evolve or to grow to become who you are if you had all of your limbs or if you still had your life, right? So that's the extreme form of violence physically. And then when it comes to cultural structure violence, what are the beliefs and attitudes and perspectives, right? That then does not allow a particular group of people, whether it's for their sexual orientation or the faith that they believe in or the skin color, the language that they speak, whatever it may be, that within a particular society and they are then discriminated against. So what are the beliefs and attitudes, which then gives rise to what are the social norms? Here we come to structural violence. So what are the social norms? What are the laws? How are the structures and systems set up? Do we give a space to all members, as many members as possible? All members is maybe impossible, but as many members as possible at the negotiating table. When we look at the three types of violence there, then when we then begin to ask, then what is peace then? So negative peace, and it's not bad, it's really good. Negative, again, language. Right? Negative peace is the absence of violence. Initially, it's just about direct violence, like the physical violence. When that ends, then, okay, we're now in negative peace. I'm more in the school of thought where it's the absence of all the three types of violence. Will we ever get to negative peace? No, of course not. But are we working towards negative peace? That's the question. So when we work towards negative peace, that to me, I'm just being a bit pedantic here, right? When we think about the conflict, then that's about conflict management, right? It's about, okay.
Do you think our systems, our political systems, our international system is designed for, truly desires negative peace?
I maintain that we are lazy intellectually, all of us, myself included, right? So all of us, and so we have to really catch ourselves here. Because when we open the headline news, right, it's about US, China, ASEAN, Malaysia mediating between Thailand and Cambodia. Who are they? Who is Singapore? What is Malaysia? India, right? Because it's actually a handful of individuals. Maybe not just more than a handful of individuals, but who are in positions of responsibility and power. So when we say, so right now, right, everyone's like concerned about the US-China trade war. It's Trump administration. It's Xi government, right? The Xi administration. Who are the people in there that are making the choices, decisions, designing the policies that then has that influence? So this again goes back to, my approach that it's individuals. The inner dimension of this. What kind of education or in general, what kind of learnings and experiences have this individual?
Have they worked with a Q in their life?
Yeah, you can put it that way, right? But the idea being then, so it's not our system right now, our global system right now has emerged after 11,000 years of settled human civilization, right? It just emerged, right? For not accidents of history in the past, right? Certain individuals had contributed ideas. So for example, right, our ethics. For state-like entities, we fall back onto utilitarian ethics, the greater good, with as little resources, with as few resources as possible, what will impact as many people as possible in a positive way. That's a utilitarian approach. It makes sense. But if we forget to have in our conversation awareness of the common good, then the most vulnerable members of societies will be forgotten. So it's about, so then the people, again, coming back to the individuals. So going back to the, who gave us that baton? I forgot which century it was, but he published that and then it grew, it emerged to be an influential way because it makes sense logically. But we are not just logical beings, we are emotional beings. And that's where the common good approach then comes in, right? I guess what I want to say, it's not the system. Yes, the system has emerged from from all the various, it's a complex thing, right? We have complex systems, but complex systems emerge from the interactions of infinite number of local, individuals. And you and I are talking here, and then you put this up and others see it. We just don't know how the ripple effect. And maybe 200 years from now, something happened because it was informed, and it was informed by, it's not just base alone, of course, but this is a drop, right?
Butterfly effect.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so many drops then lead to the ocean. One less drop, and and the ocean is lesser. It's not visibly lesser, but it's less. So again, comes back. So to me, whenever I'm asked this question, like our system is like, yeah, but right now, who are the individuals? And that's where I see my vocation, my ikigai is. Right? I'm working with young people who may be in the future in a position of real responsibility, like, with a large circle of influence. But at the end of the day, it's not just about that one person who become the prime minister or the president. Right? It's about everyone, because all of us contribute. We all have circles of influence. Some of us have larger circles. Like my wife has an amazingly large circle. My circle of influence is very, very small, and it's still very important. It's significant. Right? The classroom with this student and that student. I love the way you began our podcast about intentionality. Right? And that was something that was drummed into me by my mom and my grandfather. What is your intention when you fast? What is it? When you go to mosque for your Friday prayers, is it to show people your pious, or is it you truly have a relationship with God? So what do I choose to do when I am a teacher, an educator?
Well, since you mentioned the focus on individuals, then it, I think, brings back more into focus the work that you're doing on working with people in this education for peace kind of journey. Because just reflecting back very, very briefly, many of us who go into fields of, let's call it, in some way of service, whether it's through peace building or whether it's conflict resolution, in some way hoping, contributing to this global level, world level peace. And there's this aspiration that, some international agreement, whether it's, an Iran nuclear deal. And sure, those deals, like you said, they may have massive ramifications on so many people's lives just by putting one country off a sanctions list. That can open up so much positivity for so many people. But it then takes away from actually the value of individuals. And this question of, one is, are those people who are trying to build peace, do they have peace to give? Are they themselves in their own lives cultivating that peace for themselves to give it? Whether in our future institutions, maybe we can get into imagination territory for a moment. As we are building new states, new governments, new regimes, even within the nation state framework, whether there can be ways to help our leaders from a young age or even from a senior age to cultivate peace in their lives. That through working with, someone like you or people working with educators and helping them find peace, because individuals are so important in the system. Even in the people who are, universities have departments called peace studies. You can get a master's degree in peace studies. Conflict resolution is a common subject among UN professionals. And there's that whole space, development space, where people believe that they are contributing to world peace in a very direct way. But going back to what you had said at the start of this conversation, you must have peace first for yourself and in your life to give it. What do we see about this landscape then today, when most of the people who are involved in peace building probably don't have peace to give?
From the year 2000 till, I said, at least 2018. So that's like a good 2 decades, and the bulk of my working life, for the most part of my work in educating for peace or doing peace education. Now, I would say that I started doing peace education work in 2004. I've been educating for peace since the year 2000. Now, my intention had always been that. However, what was driving me was the adverse childhood experiences that I had gone through. Again, not saying, of course, I didn't want to have gone through all those things. However, it's just this, right? It was just life. And I am here. I can't say I'm grateful for those experiences, but those experiences made me who I am. So my intention had always been to contribute to the betterment of the human condition and planetary well-being because of my exposure to the UWC's vision, mission statement from when I was a teenager. The driving, what drove me though was a sense of rage and anger at the injustices of the world. It wasn't out of compassion or love. And it was only after it's only the last handful of years in this chapter of my life, part of my healing journey, where I'm kind of like doing my peace education work and starting to see, hey man, maybe it's better if I don't do it out of anger, that I'm doing it out of a sense of abundance and love and compassion rather than scarcity and reactivity and rage. And what a particular book that opened my eyes to this is called The Myth of Normal by Jabo Mate.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful observations that Mate made.
Yeah, tell me anything from the book that you really took away or what you really...
Well, that was the one thing that I really stuck with me, like what drives us. We can do the same thing. And I can see that qualitative feel, as a peace educator now in the classroom or in a workshop or online with my learners. The way I interact with them, the way I facilitate, the way I conclude the course or the workshop, and then the energy that my learners then take with them, it's very different from what it used to be when I was younger, when I was unaware of the unconscious drivers that were not helpful, really, not healthy, in my opinion, right? So that, it's different. So I think that, when I say that we can't give what we do not have, I forgot who I got that from. We cannot give what we do not have. We are humans, right? And we are on a journey. The person I am right now as a 51-year-old man is very different from the person I was when I was a 25-year-old man. And that's good, yeah, because I've grown, I've changed. And I will be different again. I'm different after this conversation, learning from you and, with you giving me this opportunity to articulate my arguments, then I kind of realized, I need to change something. That's something that doesn't sit well with me, right? So I'm different after today's conversation. So what you were talking about just now about how, everyone who wants to contribute to the betterment of the human condition and planetary well-being, what if we don't have peace within ourselves? It's okay. Your intentions are great, right? And in our journeys, we all will learn more about ourselves if we choose to, and we have more peace within ourselves. Yeah, the intention is there, and what are our drivers? I think those are two very different things, but they are interrelated, of course.
Well, hearing you say that also helps me. I can notice my own system soften up a little bit. Because I think I've also gone through a similar inflection point of realizing, like, what am I doing? I think I'm trying to contribute to the betterment of planetary well-being, but seeing how my own mind and seeing how I'm also, whether it's motivated by anger or motivated by a sense of injustice or motivated by a sense of searching for recognition or searching for some external validation as being a driving force. Sometimes it makes you feel like that was all a waste, like that was all wasted time. But also, as I start to reconcile with those parts of myself and start to see, as you said, like it was all on this, it's all this journey that we're on, and we're learning and we're taking and we're integrating. And yeah, and people are all coming with an intention to contribute. And perhaps on this journey, they will find what they need to find.
I think something that is really informing me right now is the idea that I am insignificant. In the large scheme of things, I am nothing. We all are. And at the same time, whatever we choose to do is consequential. The universe is 14 billion years old, and that's what our science tells us right now. If I'm fortunate, I will live to 85 healthily. That's nothing. Human civilization, settled civilization, 11,000 years. Not even an eye blink in cosmological time. So we are insignificant, every single one of us. But we matter, every single one of us, while our consciousness is present on this planet. And with that consciousness, then we do, we live, we behave, we act based on what we think and what we feel. And then how we are and what we do is consequential. I alluded to earlier, our system as it is right now, our global arrangement, right? I'm talking about human arrangement. I'm not even going into the environment, but just humans, right? The way our systems and structures have emerged where it is right now is due to all the human beings that have lived from 11,000 years ago, from the first farmers, from the first animal herders, right? Our ancestors then made certain choices, and then it had a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
And then agrarian civilizations emerged. And it's not just who were the kings and queens, but who were the people that allowed for these kings and queens, for royalty, for the monarchy to come into existence, right? And no right, no wrong, it just happened. And then fast forward 5,000, 6,000 years to where we are right now, and all the human beings that you attended that Chiang Mai for Palestine event yesterday, right? And you and all those who chose to attend made a decision, and that has a knock-on effect. Now, imagine if there was no Chiang Mai for Palestine event last night. Something in the future would not happen. We just don't know what it is right now. And we can't pin it, right? We can't trace it, oh, because of this, that's what happened. But you guys chose, and then it's there. And the energy of the consequences of that event is now in our actual reality and imagined reality. And then what will come from that, I don't know.
Yeah.
No one knows.
On the theme of knock-on events, maybe I'll bring it back actually again to myth of normal and trauma, which is what the core of the book is. And of course, trauma also plays such a big role in, perhaps the biggest role in shaping human behavior. And in reference to the Palestine example, I think everywhere I always see there's always this finger pointing, right? It's a cycle. It started at some point, and human history is so old that there's no way we're going to point at to say who is the first person who wronged somebody else. So how do we reconcile? How do we end the cycle? Can we end the cycle? These are the questions that I ponder as we are caught in these cycles of violence that just seem to get deeper.
Here we are talking about collective level violence, right? Not personal, but collective level. My opinion is, because it's a complex issue, then it's an all hands on deck approach, kind of thing. We need both at the collective and at the individual level. So when we talk about collective level here, there is the idea that we need to work with the individual humans who are in formal positions of leadership. So address their trauma, address their beliefs and attitudes, because they have a huge circle of influence. And of course, what emerges bottom up, right? Peace is a bottom up, like I say, it bubbles from all of us. We have to do that at the individual level too. And that's where the inner dimension of peace comes in. Well, at the collective level, and this is something that I think we need to reimagine based on, I love two particular ideas that Galtung observed that are not as well known as his positive peace, negative peace, and the types of violence. One is and this is talking about collective level kind of like framing that we have, right? There's what he calls the CGT, right? If I remember that correctly. So it's basically chosen, glory, and trauma. As a collective, we are the chosen people. We were glorious in our past, and we need to bring that back. We have suffered trauma from the other. So the CGT thing, it's universal, isn't it? Whether it's Ukrainian, Russian, Palestinian, Israeli, those are Burmese, in the Burmese context, Karen, Karani, Kachin, Kayin, Burman. And the global level, we were colonized. We used to be much better before the British came in. So as long as we hold on to these things, we cannot transform our violent engagement with conflict to a non-violent one. We then cannot work collaboratively in harmony towards positive peace. So CGT is kind of like embedded. This is the way we've been socialized. So how do we re-socialize that, right? So that takes quite a bit. And that's for those of us at national leadership, in national leadership positions, and at the same time, especially in democracy, the citizenry. Right. In a democracy where there's voting, the government that is formed is a reflection of the people's, is that the right word to use? Of the people who voted. The government is just a reflection of maybe not the majority, a bit more, slightly more than 50% in so many places. So that's one understanding. Another understanding that we tend to have, and I think this is because of our global history from the last 500 years, right? The colonialism and all that, which is because it's founded on the Judeo-Christian Islamic strand of thinking, right? Because we are here in Thailand, which is all about Buddhism. Right? It's
Yeah.
a bit different. So Galtung made this observation. There's also this DMA, dualism, Manichaeism, and Armageddon.
Okay.
And so dualism, binary, good and evil, light and dark. And then Manichaeism is it's a linear way of thinking. So when we think of justice, it's linear,
Yeah.
it's retribution, right? I think Manichaeism, I mean, it's been a while since I've engaged with this particular idea. So I need to refresh, go back to the readings. I'm a geek. And then there's Armageddon, right? Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, where it's, at the end of times, there will be this huge war. So this is kind of like for those of us who were socialized or who were brought up in this. And here we're talking about the dominant countries over the last 500 years, right? Which then exported this kind of like, so this is an unexamined part, right? So it's kind of like, again, it's driving us at the pre-conscious level. I wouldn't say unconscious, but pre-conscious level. It's just below the surface.
Yeah.
Why does Western Europe and the United States specifically view China the way they're viewing China as a collective?
Yeah.
Here we are talking about collective. Let's not go into the individual here. And then of course, it's the individuals who then have this understanding. So what? I mean, it's that dualism, right? It's about us and them.
Yeah.
Like so many hundreds of years, or is it thousands of years ago? No, it's only hundreds of years ago. Attila the Hun, they call it, right? It's basically Genghis Khan, the Mongolians coming in.
Yeah.
Right? So the fear of the yellow peril started from there, right? So if we trace it back to the deep narratives, right? Now, if you were to ask members of the Trump administration, for example, or members of the European Union, they wouldn't bring this up, but they are brought up in a culture that had been made afraid of the peril from the East coming in to invade, to pillage the land and rape their women and kill them all. It's from back then, right? So this is kind of like at the pre-conscious level, the socialization, and that's related to the DMA, right? The end of times and Armageddon, and therefore it's like, it informs this. We need to have nuclear weapons to like blow them all up, and in the process we blow up, but it's okay, because it's Armageddon.
So in a way, the sort of crisis is built in, like in this worldview, this DMA worldview, that you need the other. Like without the other, then your identity is relational, and without that other, then you are. And that the Armageddon of that, there is a doomsday, and everything that must be done to avoid this doomsday, shaping so much of how our politics and our culture is at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not saying in a direct manner. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is like really something that we need to really, is it? I don't know. I'm just making this observation. And therefore, it's about having that, that question, right? That perennial question that is asked, like, is human nature evil, violent?
The Hobbesian.
Or are we good, angelic? Again, it's just the narrative, right? And it's actually one of the questions that I ask my learners to examine first. What is your assumption of human nature? And once we discover what our assumptions are, we realize, because I assume human nature is one that is of greed and violence and self-aggrandizement, like it's just about me, I. That's my assumption. That's what I think humans are. Then therefore, we believe in top-down approaches. We need order, we need structure, we need systems to make sure that people aren't. But then for those of us who assume that, we are amazingly collaborative, we are empathic, that if that is our assumption, then we believe in a bottom-up, which is like, because we are all good, we will work with each other. We want what is best for all of us. I want what's best for myself, but I know that that can only happen if it is also good for you.
That journey of uncovering those assumptions is key. And that's also part of what you're doing, of helping your learners surface and uncover them, because they're imbibed into us at a very early age. And most of our learning that happens, I feel like probably from mid-teenager and above, your assumptions are already wired in you. And whatever you're learning is then built on top of that. And you're very rarely getting chances in a very structured way to uncover them. And maybe this brings me a point to, since you talked about education as a force for uniting people, which of course that's my ethos too. But learning about the education schooling system from Tyson Yonkaputra, who is an indigenous Australian systems thinker. In his book Sand Talk, he goes quite into depth about how modern schooling is a military project.
Oh,
And stemming from Europe, stemming from parts of Austria, where the idea was if you need to create your imagination and you need to create your army, you need to shape them at the level of assumptions of human nature and these levels. And so you need to get them when they're 4 and 5, and you have to separate them from their parents. So this idea of schooling as a separation from your family. So now you're no longer socialized by your family for most of your life, actually, from a young age. And then you are now in part of your reading what we're giving you, and that indoctrination program starts there. I mean, I don't think it should be seen as like the singular truth of education, but certainly like modern schooling seems to reflect that. Where and so a lot of our work it's really about unlearning and uncovering those assumptions, as you said, about human nature, which are so deep that are not easy to uncover on a day-to-day level. Like you really need guidance. You need very good literature if you're someone who can engage with literature as nerds like we are.
That's an interesting take on schooling. I've not heard of it. So now I would like to read up on that. Yeah, my take are informed by several scholars. One of them is Ken Robinson, the late Sir Ken Robinson. Really, really brilliant mind there. And when I think of learning in a formal space, education, I mean, I use the word education, it refers to learning in the formal space. Of course, the sum of human learning happens in the non-formal space and the informal space. The origins of our public education systems around the world can be traced back to the Industrial Revolution. And we all know that, which is pretty much then producing the kind of workers that we need. And that's the fundamental point. And as we move forward from the Industrial Revolution and go into the 20th century where there was decolonization and we have all these countries popping up, right? Countries that have never existed before and now or imagined into reality, especially in the 1950s and 60s after the Second World War. That nation state project, that country project becomes close, is intertwined with how good your country can fit into the economy that had emerged, the global economic arrangement that had emerged and it continues to emerge from the Industrial Revolution, kind of like the philosophies, the ways of thinking that drove the Industrial Revolution. So this to me has led to public mass education systems that focuses on the economic role that education plays. And what we learn in the non-formal and informal space, also there's elements of like the economic role, right? And of course, it happens. I mean, that's the sum of human learning. It happens in all three spaces. Here we're just looking at a school, learning in the formal space. And to me, and this is something that I very much learned from Robinson, is that the sum of human learning, besides the economic role that it plays for the individual, also has the interpersonal role and the intrapersonal role. And those two roles are not in the design or very little compared to the economic role. So we teach our physics, we teach our chemistry, our math, and our languages. And they are important, they are necessary. How can we bring in education that also elevates knowledge and skills, values, and attitudes that explore the intra within ourselves, which is the inner dimension of peace, and the interpersonal, which, and it's not just between individuals, we can also go into the collective level, right? The group level, the intergroup level. We can engage in that conversation, but we don't do that, right? In schools, we tend not to do that.
Where do you see the future of education from here? Like, if you were to imagine how education could evolve in ways that bring into practice what you've just described, how would you like to see it grow and evolve?
That's a big question, right? And my answer next year will be very different from what it is now. I've been a teacher in a school for what? From 2000 till 2015. That was when I left formal education. I left learning in the formal space, and I've been an independent educator. So I can do what I want. I'm very, very privileged. I miss teaching physics. I miss sharing physics. I'm not saying that we stop the conventional subjects that we are teaching, because if we do, the science and technology that we have now and the way we arrange our human activity will be threatened. I want us to continue in that path. So there's a lot of value in cognitive knowledge, content knowledge. right? Subject knowledge, subject specific. The economic role of education is very important. And as a teacher, I know that I struggled, and I know that my comrades, who are still teaching in schools, here I'm talking about Singapore specifically, things keep getting added to the curriculum and nothing gets taken out. It is, and I'm sure that happens in not just Singapore, but in many public education, in many education systems around the world. We keep adding on. We just don't take anything away.
It's like a risk almost to remove something.
Yeah. And that's hard. It's really hard to be a teacher. Anyone who says otherwise, look, just spend a day in school and try to engage minds. It is hard work. So what I do want to see is schools where where space-time is carved out for young minds to examine themselves, the intrapersonal part of learning. We already have interpersonal, but that can be made more critical. So I'm not talking about critical thinking as in logical thinking alone, because that is addressed by our conventional subjects, right? That trains the prefrontal cortex. Our capacity for abstract reasoning is developed there. But I'm talking about the critical theory lens, developing a critical theory lens to be able to critique the way we arrange society and critique ourselves. Like, what are we brought up with? So that's what I hope schools to be, right? And of course, there's the whole arrangement of schools. That's a separate conversation. Like, we are now we spend time with our peers, right? Same age group. That's it. There's no vertical or very little vertical interaction. A big part of our learning is school-based learning. We don't learn, we study for exams.
Yeah, because the purpose of education often is its employment rather than self-understanding and self-expression.
Yeah.
Do you think that's changing? That's shifting?
From what I can see, no. Right? And the reason why I say that is because I think all of us we still have this assumption, right? That development of self, all that happens in the non-formal, especially in the informal space, right? Oh, that's the job of the family. But as you pointed out just now, right? For all of us, for you and I, and for all our fellow human beings on this planet, when we are of school-going age, where do we spend most of our time? In school. We go in at 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning. And for those of us lucky enough to be in a school where it's half-day school, we'll be home by lunchtime. And for those of us who go to school, we tend to get home only late afternoon. And then when we get back, it's with family, mom and dad. If you are lucky, extended family, have dinner. And then we have to do homework. And then we go to sleep. Like, where's the space for informal learning, right? For us to develop that. We need to question the assumption that all those things, the intrapersonal role, that's home. Well, if it is, then we need to give more time for home. We need to give more time for the informal learning space to flourish. We don't have. So therefore, the school, during the schooling hours, we need to have that intra and interpersonal roles explicitly part of the school curriculum.
Yeah, I feel like that could be really powerful especially because today, if there's more and more awareness that schools aren't really giving us what we need, especially in this AI age today.
That's where I appreciate the OECD Learning Campus report. So the OECD published this back in 2020. By 2030, it should not. So I appreciate very much the report, which says that schooling should be about well-being, well-being of the individual and student, and therefore the well-being of the community. WHO has, as a observation to make, right? It has shared this, which is health promoting schools. How do we have schools that are health promoting? I love that too. Right, so there are, right, at the state-like entity level, there are already, suggestions, and even at the United Nations level. I forgot which year is it. This is 2025. Which year was it? It was about transforming education, transformative education, or something along. I forgot which. So it was an event in that particular year in the early 20s, if I remember correctly. Earlier, in this decade, where members, member states came in, and there were a whole series of events where it's about what is education for, where is education going, what is needed for education to be more relevant for human civilization in the 21st century. So, there are kind of like ways forward already at the state-like level. So that's why I say that I wouldn't say I'm positive, but I have faith that there are enough momentum moving forward that works towards positive peace, which we have been working in my opinion.
Well, super. I think we're kind of on the final sort of loop of the conversation. We've shared so much already on different understandings of peace, on education, the evolution of our species, the myths and the metaphors that sometimes inspire us or keep us down. What were the kind of resources that you think people listening could take in to work towards positive peace in their life? It could be books, but it could just be practices, it could be questions, anything that people can bring into their life today.
Number one, go to the Castle website on social and emotional learning. So Castle, CASEL. Start there. To me, that's a beautiful starting point. So social and emotional learning, because I think it's accessible to all of us. Because for me, the inner dimension of peace is foundational. And the next one, engage with Ken Wilber's idea. What is it called?
The integral
theory.
framework.
Yeah, integral framework, integral theory. Right? It's about the individual and the collective, the internal and the external. So just Google Wilber, Wilber, integral theory, and the 4 quadrants. I mean, there's so much out there, right? And for me, these two, I think, are good starting points for all of us. For those of us who wish to explore who we are, why we are, and therefore how and what we can be.
Super. And any ways that people might engage with you, your work, any kinds of projects that you might like to be involved in?
Yeah, I'm not really someone who puts himself out there.
Here it is.
Yeah, I'm here, right? Like, thank you for this invitation, to articulate my thoughts. Yeah, I mean, what I like to do is just basically, engage with any organization or schools that are interested in educating for peace. I'm personally very interested in doing peace education, and depending on the needs of, the group, we can explore the inner dimension, the social dimension, environmental dimension, and it boils back down to the individual and the individual learners, right? What is our intentionality? What is driving us? What are our values? And what are our goals? And our values and goals aligned? And if they are not, what needs to transform then? What needs to change? What needs to evolve? Yeah. So pretty much that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Qamaruzzaman, for, as your grandfather, your father wished to share your light in the darkness. And well, the light is just shining out behind us now. The sun is coming out. So it seems to have shifted. Conversation is moving. Thank you so much for sharing. As always, I've picked up a lot. I look forward to editing and digesting and processing. And to listeners and viewers, wherever you are around the world, I hope this conversation can bring a slice of peace that we have for us here on this balcony in Chiang Mai to wherever you are listening and watching. And if you like this conversation, hit that subscribe button. It indicates to me and to the algorithms that this content is valuable and helps in this movement to bring more light into the forest. So thank you very much.
Thank you. What a wonderful opportunity.
Dear listeners, this is likely to be one of the final episodes of season 0 of the podcast. We started this journey more than a year ago. Like all good journeys, they must come to an end. And it feels like the right moment to pause, to put my feet up and digest, absorb, reflect. There's been so much information, wisdom, inspiration, and ideas that I've received. And as we go into 2026, I would like to take some time to think, what would a new season of Light Forest look like? What might be some of the themes that worth exploring further? And it's also important for me to take some time to also rest, to go home and feel into how my system is evolving and changing. I record this here in Chiang Mai on November 29th as the temperatures start to fall and a sense of winter descends on my forest home. I'm also going to begin a small round of travel, spending some time with friends and family, and so it feels resonant that this will likely to be the last episode of season 0. I do have a couple of other people that might still come on, so I won't promise anything, but there might be a few more bonus episodes. I will update on the Substack. If you haven't already, I'd love if you could subscribe to the Substack, not just for the podcast, but also to get updates on other projects that I'm involved in that are very connected to the many themes that we cover on the podcast, and also to get more updates and stay in touch on how this podcast is going to evolve in the coming year. If you listen to this, whether it's your first episode or you're several episodes deep already, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. You have no idea what every person listening to this podcast means to me. And wherever you are in the world, I hope you're well. And I hope that the new year brings you everything that you desire.